Hello guys, Crispy here and welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, we're going to be testing the RX 6600 XT in the most well-optimized, true next-gen, and beautiful, gorgeous Forsbroken. It's none of those things, alright? I find it absurd the amount of people that actually think that of this game. Like, it's completely ridiculous, guys. The amount of comments hating on me because they're saying that this game is well optimized and it looks beautiful. But anyways, if you're one of those persons, you're wrong. Let's move on. This one is the Afox model of the RX 6600 XT. We're running it with the latest AMD drivers, and I am not overclocking it, leaving it at stock. And over in Tech Power-Ups GPU Z, you can see all of the GPU specs. Rebar is enabled. We got 8 gigs of GDDR6 2048 shading units, and this GPU runs PCI Express 4.0 times 8. Over on the left, we're pairing it with a Ryzen 7 5800X3D and 32 gigabytes of RAM to avoid CPU bottlenecks, and let's get into it, shall we? Alright, so we're starting this at 1080p resolution, just like we did with the 1080 Ti, low settings, but today we're using standard model memory and standard texture memory, because we got 8 gigabytes of VRAM and that's not enough for high stuff. The low settings preset also sets FSR2 to performance, which means that we're playing at 540p resolution, and everything else is at the lowest setting. Alright, so at performance FSR2, everything looks like a smudgy mess, but at least we're close to those 120 FPS lock in this game. As you can see, I'm going to start counting the FPS right now. It also stutters a little bit while loading new areas and stuff, so expect a few frame time spikes, but they're not game breaking whatsoever. And that's the only good thing about optimization in this game. Now the textures, if we take a look at them over here, the ground textures especially, those look absolutely horrendous. It's using 7 gigabytes of our 8 gigs of VRAM, and the textures that they give us are these. I get that this is a big open world and everything else, but, you know, they should have optimized it. Again, I don't understand how people are defending this. Oh, it's one of the biggest open world games there are. It's next gen only, PS5 and so on. Like, even the PS5, if you set it to performance mode, it drops to 720p and it can't reach 60 FPS all of the time. At least that's what people have been telling me. Another interesting thing is, this GPU is very close in performance to both the 1080 Ti, which I tested previously in the channel in Forsbroken, as well as the PS5's GPU. So I'm curious to see how it does at the higher settings as well as higher resolutions, and especially compare it a little bit to the 1080 Ti. But over here, of course, using basically the lowest settings possible with 540p resolution because of FSR, yeah, of course it doesn't have a problem playing like this, right? Let's just disable FSR now, and this is where I want to compare it a little bit with the 1080 Ti. So lowest settings, temporal AA is enabled, and native 1080p. Okay. No, not okay. Not okay. It's pretty much the same thing as the 1080 Ti. Maybe slightly faster, because it's an AMD GPU and a DirectX 12 Ultimate title, and yeah, it's better optimized towards AMD GPUs, at least going by the system requirements. They put the 4080 and the 6800 XT in the same ultra requirement for 4K 60 FPS. It's not that far off of the 1080 Ti, honestly. Maybe max FPS are way better. In some areas, it will increase up into like the 80s at times probably, whereas the 1080 Ti didn't do that. But the minimum FPS are really similar. I think the 1080 Ti was getting like 41 FPS minimum with a lot of effects and stuff like that, which we're gonna see right now, fighting these guys over here. Hello. There it is. Alright, so here the 1080 Ti was dropping to 41 frames per second. This one is dropping 46, 43. Basically the same thing, you know, it's the same experience overall. So to those who defended this game, saying that the 1080 Ti is only getting these FPS because it's a DirectX 12 Ultimate next-gen title and it's only optimized for the newer stuff, Well, this GPU usually performs like a 1080 Ti, and it's no different in Forsbroken. So no, it's not optimized for the newer stuff either. It's not because the 1080 Ti is old that it performed poorly, especially around this area with the vegetation, like the flowers and stuff. And mind you, the 1080 Ti was using the higher texture settings, which didn't look like this because it is an 11GB GPU. Yeah, this is kind of unacceptable, right, for medium textures. Like, what are these? This is basically all that an 8GB GPU can do in this game, guys. No matter if you use the ultra settings, it will look like this in some areas. We should move on to like 1440p now. All right, here we go. 2560 by 1440 using the exact same settings. From now on, I'm gonna use some quality FSR, and at 1080p, by the way, quality FSR looks terrible, so I really recommend you to just use the native resolution. It was already really playable. The game is playable with like 40 plus FPS, even 30 plus FPS all of the time. So at least there's that. If you really want to play this, you can, okay, with the 6600 XT, even at 1440p, if it doesn't drop from 30, it's fine. Again, it's getting pretty similar results to the 1080 Ti here at this resolution and settings. I don't know, since people were telling me and like complaining so much about the older Pascal architecture, I really thought it was just a problem with lower end or the older GPUs in this case, not lower end. Like 1080 Ti was high end, of course. But no, it's not. As you could see there, it still drops into the 20s at 1440p low settings, right? In worst case scenario, it can drop into the 20s. And to be fair, those effects actually look kind of cool. I've been crapping on this game's graphics for obvious reasons. It doesn't look anywhere near as good as like Red Dead Redemption 2 and stuff like that. Even Cyberpunk, I've seen somebody telling me, oh, you only say that it doesn't look as good as Cyberpunk because it doesn't have neon lights. I mean, Cyberpunk at least has really good textures, and the lighting is impressive in that game as well, but you can't really directly compare, I guess, because it has no vegetation like this. Let's stop it there. 1440p still provides a decent experience on low settings, but it will drop from 30, and whenever it does so, it's rough, right? So I suggest you to enable quality FSR at this resolution, just like I did with the 1080 Ti. It looks decent now. It's still a bit of a smudgy mess in some areas, especially when you're moving. If you're paying close attention to her clothes, YouTube compression is gonna wreck everything, by the way, so you can't really do that. But I am seeing a little bit of pixelation there, all right? Here we go. All of them are here. Let's do this. Still dropping into the 50s, to be expected, 40s even. Now it's closer to what we got at 1080p native and low settings. Maybe slightly better because it dropped to like 43, now it dropped to 44. It's almost the same thing, 42 right there. Yeah, it's really similar experience to that. Let's see it in those flower fields, and it is dropping to like the lower 60s, higher 50s at times. Slightly better, I would say, than 1080p low native. But if you disable the FPS counter, it's going to be exactly the same experience. Nobody would be able to tell the difference in smoothness, that is. In graphical fidelity, I would say it looks a little bit better like this, especially if you have a 1440p monitor. Lastly, for the low settings, we got 4K resolution, using the same lowest settings with medium textures, and no FSR first. Alright, this is it. And you know what's interesting? I just remembered. People were complaining a lot about my 1066GB video. Like, oh, it's a 7-year-old card, of course it can't play in this new title. It would be expected, honestly, if this looked way better than it does. But that GPU was dropping from 30 FPS at 720p resolution. And I just don't think that's acceptable yet for a 1060 level card. Since we are seeing that there is not much of a difference between Pascal and the newer RDNA 2 stuff GPUs from AMD, you know, the 6600 XT and 1080 Ti. I feel like the 6500 XT would be close in performance to the 1066GB. And now I would really love to have a 6500 XT to test in this game and to see like those 30 FPS at 720p low settings. And I'd be curious to see what people have to say about that, what those people that defended the game so dearly have to say about a not so old GPU getting those kinds of frames, because 6500 XT is not that old, it's one generation old, same gen as this, which is comparable to the PS5 GPU. It's just a little bit lower end, of course, more entry level or something like that, but it's still capable of playing pretty much everything else aside from this, I guess. 4K is not playable, nobody was expecting it. I didn't even talk about the performance figures here, but obviously 4K is not for this card. I'm not sure if the PS5 plays this game at 4K, probably not native, right? But yeah, even with quality FSR, as you can see, it drops. Oh, maybe it was just applying there. Okay, now it's applied and we're getting 40s. Yeah, that's around the same as 1080 Ti. Once again, this graphics card performance is really close to the 1080 Ti's performance. And which is really close to like the 5700 XT's performance, which when that GPU came out in 2018, or yeah, I think it was 18, it was very comparable to the 1080 Ti in 2080 as well. Now, of course, you might think it's playable outside of these things, you know, these effects. But once you do the Ring of Fire thing, it will drop, of course, inevitably. I'm surprised it isn't dropping more, though. Yeah, 27 there. All right, yeah, just 4K, forget it, okay? Unless you want to play with, like, balanced FSR, which will start looking like 1440p with quality FSR anyways. Yeah, it's pretty close, I would say. You can see some pixelation already whenever we're running. It just doesn't look anywhere near 4K anymore. But if you're playing on a TV, for example, with a PS5 setup or something like that, this would look interesting still, you know? And it's still low settings. Let's put this up again, see if it drops into the 20s again. Oh boy, pretty close. 30s. Yeah, 31 is the minimum so far. Not bad. Interesting. Yeah, it doesn't seem to drop from 30 FPS. So if you want the 4K experience for some reason, which won't really be a 4K experience anymore because it's pixelated, balanced FSR will do it at the lowest settings. Oh yeah, and if you didn't catch it yet, I'm playing the demo because I'm not paying 80 euros for this game. It's a little bit less intensive than the actual game itself. Playing on the standard settings now, or the medium settings. Oh, I remember seeing somebody very mad at me for calling the standard settings medium. Like, it's just a word, you know, standard, medium, who cares? 1080p using the medium settings. And of course, I forgot to disable that motion blur, so we gotta do that. Motion blur is off now, okay, and the FSR2 is also off. And we're seeing really decent FPS. It's still kind of similar to low settings. I am a little bit surprised about that. Huh, interesting. Maybe in the flower field, it will be a little bit more intensive. Wait a second. Yeah, it wasn't getting lower 50s in this area for sure. Yeah, all right. 40s around here. Okay, that's what I expected. All right, 45 in these fields. I mean, it does look a little bit more impressive for sure. Like, you can see a lot more shadows in the grass as well as ambient occlusion, so if I had to choose, I would definitely choose medium settings. You also get some fog at the distance. The LOD on the trees isn't as bad as low settings. That was super noticeable. This is still very noticeable, but at least on far away objects and trees, you got that fog to disguise it a little bit. It's definitely not justified to run like this, in my opinion at least. Yours might differ, of course, and you might be very triggered watching this video, but it's just what I think, and a lot of people agree with me as well. Anyways, effects over here, dropping into the 30s. It's not bad, alright? It's not dropping from 30 FPS, so I could still play the game like this, absolutely, yeah. I'm doing whatever I can to make the FPS drop there. Getting close to the fire effects and stuff, and it didn't drop. If I had a 1080p monitor with a 6600 XT and I really wanted to play this game, I would play it like this. Native resolution, medium settings, or at 1440p medium settings with FSR2 on quality, because that also worked pretty well with the 1080 Ti, I believe. 51 FPS is the average, 35 is the 1% lows. Now, let me check the textures. They should be exactly the same because we're still using the same settings on the texture quality. Yep. All right. I'm not gonna say any. Wait. Did they load now? Kind of. Oh, if I do this, they. What happened there? They loaded for a second. I saw it. It was looking a little bit better. Alright, texture streaming issues, I guess. You can also utilize some quality FSR here at 1080p. Again, I do not recommend this because it looks very pixelated. Oof, it's so soft and blurry now. But it does get you 60 plus in the flower fields, which is nice. Yeah, not bad. It definitely feels way smoother, but in a game like this, I would prefer to have better graphics for sure. Let's just leave it right there, all right? I would not use this at 1080p at all. Now, 2560 by 1440 using the same medium standard settings, right? Without motion blur. All right, it's looking way sharper now, way better. But it will definitely drop from 30 FPS. Even if I start doing this here, it might drop, I don't know. Not really. Alright, wait. Nope. Okay, yeah. It's holding up, at least over here. But once I throw the Ring of Doom, it will get wrecked, for sure. So just fighting things normally is alright. But when you do this, yeah, it already dropped there to 29. 29 is not really the problem. The issue is 26. The mid-20s is where you're going to feel that slowdown for sure. 24, yeah, it's very cinematic for sure. So here we go, quality, FSR, and again, at 1440p, it doesn't look anywhere near as bad as 1080p. It's pretty usable now. And it's getting 60s, where we were getting, like, what, higher 30s, I believe. So, a good improvement for sure. And it's probably not going to drop into the 20s anymore. Yeah, it's barely dropping into the 30s now. So, again, another great option to play with the RX 6600 XT or 1080 Ti. I feel like I'm testing the 1080 Ti all over again, but with way less power consumption and a little bit lower textures. You know, if you use the high or ultra high settings, it will be way more intensive, and the gains in visuals aren't really justified there. I'm not gonna play at 4K and medium settings because on low it was already unplayable, even with FSR. So I guess we should move on to high. Here we go, high settings preset, guys, which disables FSR by default and 1080p. All right, so we're getting 40s, 50s, you know, in the middle of the flower field. That's not too bad. Should you say flower field? Like, flowers, these are flowers, right? But flour is also the thing that you use to bake bread with, right? Like, imagine a flower field, the things for the breads. That would be very interesting and kind of a new thing in gaming. Please make it happen. Add a new area in no, stupid. Let's go. Let's see the worst case scenario now. Come over here. All of these boys. There we go. 40s, 30s already. Let's go. Get close to the wall of fire here. Not dropping from 30 FPS. That's impressive as heck, actually. I thought it would drop a lot. Right. Maybe at higher settings, it is a little bit better than the 1080 Ti. I guess this is where the architectural advantages of RDNA 2 are showing up at higher settings compared to Pascal, of course. I would still choose the medium settings because I can't see much of a difference. But it is pretty impressive. I wasn't expecting this. Now, quality FSR, it's getting us 80s, but once again, super pixelated. The different presets using FSR at the same resolution, it doesn't really make a difference in terms of the smudginess of the image, so that's why it's still looking pretty meh here with quality FSR, but it's getting 60 plus. That's pretty impressive. If they improved FSR basically a bit here, it would look pretty good and perform really well, as you can see. Not bad. Yeah, we're getting around the same averages and slightly better 1% lows than 1080p low settings native resolution without FSR. So that's really impressive. And this is high settings, of course. Now, 1440p using the high settings is gonna be way worse, of course. Yeah, 30s already, so you already know that it will drop into the 20s by quite a lot because it's getting lower 30s here. Might even drop into the 20s in the flower field. Oh my god, look at that. Yeah. Oh, 23, 22. It's so cinematic. Oh, beautiful stuff. I love it. Nope. It's terrible. Now, quality FSR 2. I really hope this isn't the standards of the newer titles coming out these days in 2023, you know. Let's throw this out again and see. Now it's not dropping. This is also an option, guys. I thought it would drop a lot compared to medium settings here on high, but it didn't. So you can play on high. Absolutely. Damn, that's a little bit impressive. It's not so impressive compared to other titles again, but for Forsbroken, I was expecting worse. And let's play at the ultra high settings. We're using ray tracing now, all right? Just gonna restart it to make sure that it fully applies everything. Okay, and to no one's surprise, Ultra is dropping from 30 right away. It's getting the same FPS as 4K low, actually. Very interesting. It is terrible, guys. Ray tracing is enabled and everything, so of course, you can't expect anything. This is also 1440p. I'm gonna try FSR. Again, we've already found the perfect settings for this GPU, so right now I'm just curious to see how it performs at different settings and FSR settings and stuff like that, right? Alright. Oh boy. Yeah, it's still terrible even using FSR. Very pixelated in some cases. Like the particle effects, which are probably the most impressive stuff about this game's graphics, just get super pixelated using FSR, even at 1440p. Lastly, 1080p using the same ultra-high settings without quality FSR first, thank you, and without the motion blur as well. Honestly, a GPU like the 6600 XT just usually can't run ray tracing whatsoever. It's super hard for these RDNA 2 GPUs to run it, especially the mid-range, lower-end ones. So getting 30 plus, at least just walking around, it's decent compared to everything that we saw so far in this game and how horribly it runs and so on. But of course, if you do this, it gets wrecked. Obviously, that's to be expected. So yeah, the fire. I love fire so much. No. Quality FSR. Oh, it's so pixelated and blurry, dude. Oh my god, it looks really bad. It looks really bad at 1080p, at least on my 42-inch monitor, which is a huge size for 1080p, of course. On a smaller monitor, it might look good, but I've seen some people saying that it also looks super pixelated on smaller monitors, so there's that, my friends. This is 1080p, quality FSR, with ray tracing. Ray tracing is also a little bit more VRAM hungry, so that could be why we're seeing those stutters appearing more often now at these settings. And finally, we've arrived at the crocodile party, and it is dropping into the 30s. Wow. All right. I expected it to drop from 30, not into the 30s. It's using ray tracing and everything. Right. I am just impressed at the performance of the 6600 XT a little bit, not at the performance of the game. That's still terrible, so don't let my reactions fool you. I just was expecting worse. And that's been it. Thank you very much for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one very soon. This entire video, I had a 670 up there, not a 6600 XT. Alright, I'll just put a 6600 XT in post there. Love you all. Bye-bye.